I'd now like to introduce an Emmy-nominated composer who recently completed the score for Law and Order: Organized Crime, Ruth Barrett. Thank you so much for joining us. So is there more to set up in terms of what we're going to hear tonight?
I had to kind of cherry pick the ones that, like, kind of a mixture of my favorite cues with ones that I thought might lend itself to this orchestral, like knowing the band we've got, which is a stonking 54-piece orchestra, which was during the process was expanding and expanding. So it's going to be very, very exciting to hear. It's got a little bit of the Benson and Stabler love theme to start off with. It takes us into Stabler's theme, which I talked about with the mandolin, which has got a lot of energy, which you hear right at the start of the first episode. Then there's a theme for Stabler's wife and the funeral and the kind of the grief. And there's a lovely vocal that you hear there by Anna Lena, or Era, she's known as. Mm-hmm. So we go into the sadness, then a bit of action into the chase, the kind of a little taster of the chase music with Stabler on the hunt for Wheatley. Then we go into a spoiler alert. Can I say stuff about the show? I guess because it's been out. Wheatley's son kills his girlfriend, which is absolutely tragic, and he kind of does it because daddy told him to do it. He doesn't really want to. Basically, she's a cop, so she was spying on stuff. Yeah. So it was a bit dangerous, but that one is like Wheatley's theme, but done in a very emotional way, because I felt like it wasn't Richie's fault. He just did it because his daddy said so.
So I wanted to ask you first, just how you got involved with Law and Order: Organized Crime and why the show is one you were excited to work on.
Law and Order: Organized Crime. Well, for starters, Organized Crime is like a new spin-off of the Law and Order franchise. And I was just so excited to get involved because it's set in New York and it's starring Chris Maloney. It's Elliot Stabler. It's like, that's kind of exciting, being Brit. And the production kind of reached out to me, actually, because they'd heard one of my shows or a few of my things on Netflix. I think one of them being Collateral. So they were drawn to that. And they're like, who did that then? And tracked me down to Southeast London, which is where I live. And they're like, so how about it? I had a meeting with Arthur Forney, one of the exec producers on the show, and I've been working with him mainly. And yeah, he's like, let's do this thing. Well, it took a couple of months to kind of get everything finalized, and then there was some serious deadlines to contend with.
Yeah.
But, wow, yeah, it was such a ride to work on. Absolutely brilliant, like pulse racing. Aside from the deadline, just seriously gets your pulse racing working on a show like this.
Is there anything more to say in terms of what it's like for a composer to step into like a really established, beloved franchise like Law and Order with this new spinoff? Like, what is the balance like in terms of thinking about shows that have come before, but also creating something new?
So with Law and Order, there's obviously this big fan base and there's a lot of expectation. People are desperate to see what Elliot Stabler is going to do next. And obviously the Law and Order has this iconic theme tune, but that was going to be continued. That was always going to be continued in the show. But for the score, the production would just like, go guns, go do your thing. We want to reboot this. We want to create something completely unique because it's got its own format. It's basically gangsters, you know, cat and mouse game over 8 episodes. So it really needed a completely new score. And they didn't really want me to listen to anything from before, but just to kind of go with my gut on it and do my thing from what they heard of my music so far.
What were your first thoughts and what was the process in terms of arriving at the sound that we hear ultimately for Organized Crime? Like, how did you get there and what were you thinking about?
So for me, like when I start a show, I always like to think about the characters. And for Organized Crime, Chris Maloney is the main dude. So it was his theme that I wanted to crack first. So I kind of had some of the rough assemblies playing along in the background. And I was just thinking about this guy and what's happened to him, because when the show starts, his wife has just been blown up kind of in front of his eyes. And so the whole premise of the show is he's got to catch the people who are behind it. So I wanted to create a theme for him that was about that hunt, but also quite heroic as well, rather than depressing, because this guy is just bristling with energy. And it's also, he spent a lot of time in Italy, so I wanted to give it a bit of an Italian flavor. So I thought of a mandolin as being his kind of key instrument, because it's got quite a macho feel to it. So yeah, he's got a macho mandolin, and then I let his theme become this heroic sort of, which actually came from the mandolin melodies that I was playing around with. And then his nemesis, Wheatley, who's the bad guy who you see in the very first episode, which is interesting, has a very almost descending melody and lots of nasty synth noises, so that it's almost the yin and the yang. He has dark tones. So I really wanted to give him that kind of nasty side, and also throw in a bit of classical, I don't know, almost Italian opera references in there. You know, the family, the Italian gangsters. It sounds like it could be corny, but it has a hint of that kind of Godfather familiarity that you feel the chord sequence have a familiarity to them that kind of lends itself to thinking about this history of violence that's gone back centuries, you know, bad guys doing bad stuff.
It's about the specifics of your process as a composer, like how you like to work, how that was reflected in the process of putting together this score.
So I really like working with live musicians. I don't really like doing anything inside the box. I've always worked with musicians, and I've had sort of this gang of people that I've worked with. And I really feel that enhances the music that I'm doing, because it has a lot of personality to it. Well, I feel that they all bring their personalities to the table. So I really, despite the deadline on the show, I really wanted to kind of bring these voices together. I wanted a vocal, I wanted the mandolin, I wanted electric guitars, electric cello, and then the strings as well. I wanted them to be real and live, as opposed to using samples, as well as using samples, and tune percussion to kind of bring this kind of driving textural hotbed in which there could be epic soaring stuff on top. So it has got strings and brass, which would hear when you hear the orchestral rendition of it, it is in essence what I've done, but it's just been hyped up to include the orchestral sound. So because of COVID, none of us could really be in the same place. So all my musicians are in different studios around the world, really. So I would send them parts, and then they would play them and send them back. And sometimes would riff on them and experiment. So you get like some cool loop guitars in there, and there's things that it would be difficult to write down, but because of the people I'm using, I know I just keep steering them and let's go a bit wilder here, you know. And I have a very amazing engineer, stroke producer, musician, my husband, who also plays cello, bass, you name it. He's kind of my prince in the cupboard, who that's able to, because he engineers as well, we're able to kind of roll around the clock to get this score together. I kind of write by the seat of my pants. I'm quite a deadline junkie, which is good for this job. I kind of ride on the adrenaline, and I find that once I've gone past the fear factor, which I did have on the show, because I knew that there was a lot at stake, and the performances on the show are just so strong. I really feel like they're like almost, I feel like they're family. I don't know them, but I feel like I have a responsibility to support this show and produce the most epic score that it could be, which sometimes, yeah, it kind of goes to the wire. But yeah, I think you can kind of hear the energy in it, and I think that's brought together by the personalities working on it.
Since its premiere, the show has obviously stood on its own ground. It's achieved great success, built a fan base. It got the season 2 renewal. What has it been like to see that?
it's been so amazing that season 2 got commissioned. I think we were always kind of hoping that it would, because when you're working on a show, I think right from the beginning, when I saw the very first cut of the show, I just thought this is brilliant. No music, you know, temp music, not cut, not finished cut. It already, I was kind of I was crying in the first scene, you know, when you see what happens to Elliot and what happens to his wife and what he has to do, like, to gather his family together. I felt very moved by it and very kind of inspired to write the music. So I think we just hoped that the ratings would amount and that people, it seemed like, yeah, why wouldn't you like this show? Because, and the writing as well, Eileen Shekran's writing is just brilliant because it's so nuanced. You know, it's a detective show, it's a gangster show. Some of the tropes you may think, oh, we've seen this sort of thing before, but she manages to get so many issues in there and so many interesting topics that are going on today, but without bashing you over the head with it. You know, it's done in such a subtle, grown-up, smart way that I just, and I find that the production, Arthur and all the team that I work with are just so smart that makes it such a joy to work on. You know, it's just it's really tight ship, and I just believe in the show because I just think it's great to do a mainstream show, but that also has a lot to say about what's going on in the world. You know, it doesn't say it's art house, but yet it explores some of the issues that some of those movies do. I think the aim was almost to make let's make an eight episode kind of movie here. That was the ambition for it. So yeah, we were aiming high. So I'm really just so happy that it's gone down well, you know.